Now, I've talked about AtGames a couple of times, specifically about their systems or their little plug-and-play controllers that they release and then call them systems. It's never been very good from what I can tell. Most of the times when you buy them, it's pretty obvious that they are cheaper, and generally the games on there don't work too well. I took a look at their Blast controller, and that was its own controversy, and I took a look at their Sega Genesis. They've had a couple of them, but their most recent one was probably the best one they've done, and it still wasn't very good. Fortunately, Sega has moved away from them, and now they're doing their own mini, which is, I would say, comparable to the Super Nintendo and Nintendo Classic, and that's a good thing because, well, that actually means now that PlayStation is the company that's making the worst plug-and-play system when it comes to the bigger companies, but AtGames will always, I think, have, like, the worst systems in general when it comes to plug-and-play systems, so I guess it's not too surprising to hear that their business practices seem to be comparable to their build quality of their devices. And I shouldn't be too surprised by this in general, just because we saw what happened previously with their Blast controllers that shipped to retailers with NES ROMs, but were shipped to reviewers with arcade ROMs. So we had two different looks at the games, and they were very different in terms of playability between them. So now, here we are with Bandai Namco actually suing, that's right, suing AtGames over Miss Pac-Man. Now, this article is actually from GameIndustry.biz. They did a very good job summarizing this. I also have a thread on Twitter that I wanted to go over from Sean Musgrave, talking a bit more about the case file and what's happening, because there is like a whole court document. It appears to be kind of behind like a paywall and everything, but they did a good job summarizing it. And I figure we would talk about it. So this, as you see, Bandai sues AtGames over Miss Pac-Man mini arcade cabinet. That's very important because they're not technically allowed to use Miss Pac-Man, and there is a full story to this, but they seem to be talking about an arcade cabinet, and I went around looking for one. The only one that I could really find that would show up and seems to be sold at Walmart is from a different company, not AtGames, and as far as I can tell, not a subsidiary, so I don't think this mini arcade cabinet actually got to market or got to retail store shelves, but it was enough for Bandai Namco to kind of set off the alarm bells and say, wait a minute, we got to do something about this. They actually talk about the reputation being damaged as well, and I'll tell you, Bandai, as soon as you started working with them, your reputation was damaged. Same with Sega. We'll talk a bit about more of that later on. But let's read down here. The complaint also alleges AtGames caused irreparable harm to Bandai following the bodged Pac-Man licensing deal, and Bandai Namco Entertainment America has filed a lawsuit against developer AtGames for alleged copyright infringement over its use of the Miss Pac-Man character. Now, they had the ability to use Pac-Man, but I guess they didn't want to stop there, and they wanted to use Miss Pac-Man as well. I'm not really sure why AtGames seems so intent on using Miss Pac-Man, because there is like a longer story. There's like a 7-year thing, apparently. I'm not kidding. It seems really odd for everything like this and to risk what seems to be the company over Miss Pac-Man. Must be really big fans of Miss Pac-Man, but let's read on here. The filed last week in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California. The lawsuit also alleges counterfeiting, unfair competition, and false advertising. That's a lot. Counterfeiting, copyright infringement. Those are some big things there, right? That's a big deal in the U.S. So I don't think this is going to be like a slap on the wrist. I think we're talking like serious fines and money here. It's not like a little bit. Like, I wonder if this will potentially damage AtGames to the point where they can't recover. Let's read on here, though. Details of the case lead back to 2012 when AtGames CEO reportedly approached Bandai with proposition to sell plug-and-play handheld devices featuring Miss Pac-Man. They were turned down, though. Bandai pretty much rejected it heavily. I think a lot of it has to do with another company, another party being involved, and then you start getting into a lot of royalty situations and trying to split the pie, essentially, multiple ways, and that can get into a whole thing. However, that's not really what AtGames wanted to hear. I mean, we're talking back to 2012, and here we are now in 2019, and they apparently have been working heavily still to get Miss Pac-Man. Now, they've used Pac-Man, right? We saw it in the Blast arcade controller. I believe they used it in other plug-and-plays as well, so that's not an issue. They're even allowed to use Pac-Man on the front of the boxes, right? I think that's a big deal because a lot of people remember Pac-Man. I think everybody knows Pac-Man, right? For the most part, everyone knows the game and everybody enjoys playing it, even for 5 or 10 minutes, you can usually get a kick out of it still. Most people will tell you that. But you can see last year AtGames was developing a product that included the original Pac-Man license. However, Bandai alleges that AtGames failed to uphold its end of the agreement, producing something that was materially different from the approved version, which caused irreparable harm to Bandai's reputation and goodwill. I actually wonder if they're talking about that Blast controller, but from what I can tell, the big thing that this is all revolving around is the use of Miss Pac-Man, but that actually sounds very much the same as that Blast controller, doesn't it? Materially different and everything. Yeah, the ROMs were different, so that's all I can assume is that that's for, but it says, then in August this year, Bandai was alerted to the existence of a Miss Pac-Man home arcade cabinet developed by AtGames. The cabinet features copyrighted images and characters, and Bandai alleges that Miss Pac-Man software was included without its permission. That's something else, and then it gets even crazier. Apparently, as it says here, Bandai alleges that AtGames sold the product to retailers, making false claims that the Miss Pac-Man arcade cabinet was legitimately licensed. Now, keep in mind, you look at the packaging, and it says like officially licensed, right? That's a big deal because that means you went to the company who owns the rights to them, and they have agreed to do that. Basically, it's like, oh, this isn't technically like, a counterfeit, right? It's not some knockoff. This is the real deal. We have permission to use this character from the company who owns them. They told retailers that they have permission to use Miss Pac-Man. That is something else, because you're not dealing with like little companies. We see these things in Walmart, Target, Best Buy. I don't know if GameStop might sell them, but I definitely know Walmart and Target sell them. I've seen them there, right? That is a big deal. Those are big chains, big retail chains to work with. And at that point, they would unknowingly be selling counterfeit goods after being promised from the manufacturer that they were good, right? They were completely legal and legit. That is an issue. Now, of course, I'm sure Walmart, Target, and everything, they have probably some agreements that would get them out of it, but at that point, if you are AtGames, that is a serious violation, and you could be in some big trouble. Now, I wanted to point out, I'll leave this link, by the way, down in the description if you guys want to read through it a bit more. Now, there was a Twitter thread that I also wanted to point to from Sean Musgrave, who basically did a bit more of a summary of the case and picked out a few things that were kind of interesting. We're going to jump over here and start at the top where it says some real drama going on with AtGames right now. So they've apparently been pestering Namco for ages for Miss Pac-Man license, and Namco's turned them down, mostly because of the complicated royalty structure and ownership of the games. Namco's been in discussion with GCC, who's the original developers of Miss Pac-Man, lately, trying to buy them out once and for all. And of course, they would be the owners then of Miss Pac-Man. It is split right now, that's the problem, and Bandai's trying to rectify that, bring it all together. They already have Pac-Man, get Miss Pac-Man, and things will be a lot easier to do re-releases on. Look, they're going to put Pac-Man everywhere they can. So, get Miss Pac-Man, bring it all together. Yeah, that makes sense to me. But this is where it gets interesting and kind of underhanded, I would say, on AtGames' part. Because remember, they're working with Bandai Namco. This is one of their clients, right? AtGames apparently went behind Namco's back and has been directly negotiating with GCC to buy their rights to Miss Pac-Man and also inherit the royalty structure and agreements with Namco, and have been claiming to sub-licensees that they've already done the deal. So that's what I was talking about before, where they've already told Walmart and probably Target and other places that, oh, we did it. We have the rights to use this character model, when they don't technically, because while it doesn't appear that Bandai is 100% sure that they have not done the deal, that is some pretty underhanded business tactics to do that, considering Bandai Namco is also negotiating with them, probably would be able to pay them out more money, I assume, or give them a better deal, and then one day they show up and it's AtGames in the chair at the business meeting. That would be something else. That'd be some crazy stuff. I hope they would at least turn around in like the big back chair, right, and it's AtGames, but Namco confronted AtGames about this and they denied several times all of it, and they are unable to verify if AtGames has or hasn't bought the rights from GCC. So what do? They're going to take them to court, right? That's what you have to do at this point if you're Bandai Namco, because now we hear that they are using Miss Pac-Man. Miss Pac-Man is the target of AtGames, it seems. So I'm not sure what happens with that. If they did, as Sean says, if they really did acquire GCC's rights to Miss Pac-Man, I wouldn't expect to ever see that game re-released again. Neither party can release the game without the other's agreement, as far as I know. So they would pretty much go into a stalemate, and unfortunately for Miss Pac-Man, that would, I think, be it at that point. And I wonder, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure this out. What did AtGames think was going to happen here? Because you're going up against Bandai Namco. They won't play around with this. They're much bigger than AtGames, so they can take them to court. They can, string out litigation. But if they really have a case here when it comes to, as they're saying, copyright infringement, counterfeiting, false advertising, which I assume that has to do with that blast controller that a lot of us looked at on YouTube. What do they think was going to happen? Because those are some serious allegations that would come with hefty fines, penalties, everything according to the U.S. law. So that would probably ruin AtGames, I assume, put them out of business. All this over Miss Pac-Man. You know what? It also kind of feels like desperation to a degree, because they, of course, lost the deal with Sega, right? Because we're seeing Sega do their own thing, and who knows? I mean, at this point, everyone's doing mini consoles. Who's to say Bandai Namco couldn't do it themselves as well if they really wanted to? It almost feels like AtGames kind of saw this and said, well, we need to act now if we're going to do this. Let's go talk with GCC. Let's try to make a deal, and let's just take Miss Pac-Man away from Bandai Namco, and we'll just do it ourselves. So if they have not made a deal with GCC at all, then they're probably to the point where they're going to be sued into oblivion. So I'm not really sure how this is going to play out. It's going to be very interesting to see how this case ends and what they come to an agreement on. And we'll find out if they actually have the rights from GCC to do this. Because if they don't, then I think that's it for AtGames. And what a way to go out. All of that over Miss Pac-Man. Not even like an exploding console or something that they get sued over, right? I mean, I've seen their consoles. I'm a little concerned myself. Thanks, guys, for watching. I'll see you next time.